My name is Amelia Hayes. I was once cast out by my own family, labeled the disappointment because I dared to choose a life that didn't fit their mold. But they crossed a line the moment they tried to destroy the reputation of my 10-year-old son. What they didn't expect was that the very woman they called weak would be the one to bring down the entire Hayes dynasty in a courtroom. Before I share the full story, from a wedding torn apart to courtroom reckonings to a brand new beginning rooted in love and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever had to stand up to your own family to protect what's right, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to know what happened next. I never thought I'd be the kind of mother who couldn't provide a stable home for her child. Yet here I was, staring at the eviction notice taped to our apartment door in Seattle, while my 10-year-old son Ethan practiced his violin in the next room. The melody drifted through the thin walls, a piece he'd been working on for months, determined to perfect it for the school recital that would never happen now. My name is Amelia Hayes, and at 34, I'd managed to build what I thought was a modest but secure life for us. The library job didn't pay much, but it kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. More importantly, it kept us far from Napa Valley, far from my mother's vineyard estate, and far from the family that had made it clear I was the daughter who could never quite measure up. Growing up as Denise Hayes' eldest daughter meant living in the shadow of perfection, except the perfection wasn't mine. It belonged to my younger sister, Isla, who emerged from the womb knowing exactly how to charm our mother, how to embody the Hayes family image, and how to make me look like a disappointment by comparison. While I lost myself in books and painted watercolors of the vineyard at sunset, Isla learned to network at country club brunches and judge wine vintages before she could legally drink them. My father left when I was 15. The divorce was swift, surgical, and accompanied by an NDA that ensured we'd never speak of why he really left. What I remember most about that time was how my mother's coldness crystallized into something harder, sharper. She looked at me and saw his features, his weakness, as she called it, the tendency to feel too much, to question the Hayes way of doing things. Emotions are luxury items we can't afford, she'd tell me whenever I cried about Dad's absence. They clutter the mind and weaken resolve. By the time I turned 20, I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I left for Seattle with nothing but my second-hand car and the acceptance letter to the University of Washington. I thought I was escaping to build something real, something mine. I met Marcus in my junior year. Charming, passionate, full of dreams about changing the world through sustainable architecture. When I got pregnant, he promised we'd be different from our parents. Better. He left when Ethan was 3 months old. No explanation, no forwarding address, just an empty space where his promises used to live. But Ethan made every struggle worth it. He had my dark hair, but his own spirit entirely, gentle and observant, always noticing when others were hurting, always trying to help. He collected broken things, birds with damaged wings, music boxes that no longer played, people like us who didn't quite fit anywhere. At 10, he was already showing signs of the empathy that my mother had tried so hard to beat out of me. The day I lost my job, I sat in my car for an hour before going home, trying to figure out how to tell him. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. Just numbers on a spreadsheet, and I was one of them. 3 weeks later, despite sending out dozens of applications, I had nothing. The Seattle job market was brutal, especially for librarians. My savings evaporated faster than morning mist. "Mom, are you okay?" Ethan asked one evening, finding me staring at bills spread across our tiny kitchen table. "Just tired, sweetheart?" I lied, gathering the papers before he could see the red overdue stamps. "Maybe we could sell some of my stuff," he offered quietly. "I don't really need the keyboard. I can practice at school." That broke me. My 10-year-old son trying to sell his belongings to keep us afloat. That night, I did something I swore I'd never do. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in over a decade. My thumb hovered over my mother's number while my pride and desperation waged war in my chest. The phone rang 3 times before her assistant answered. Of course, she had an assistant now. I need to speak with Denise Hayes, I said, my voice steadier than my hands. Tell her it's Amelia. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if they'd hung up. Then my mother's voice, unchanged by the years, cut through the line like a blade wrapped in silk. Amelia, I wondered when you'd call. She didn't sound surprised. She never sounded surprised, as if my failure and eventual return had been penciled into her calendar years ago. I need help, I said, the words tasting like ash. Just for a few weeks, until I can find another job. The house has plenty of room, she replied, as if we'd last spoken yesterday instead of years ago. Though I should mention Isla's wedding is in 6 weeks. The vineyard will be quite busy with preparations. Of course. Isla was getting married, the golden daughter claiming her golden future while I crawled back home with my tail between my legs. We'll stay out of the way, I promised. See that you do. And Amelia, there are standards to maintain. I trust your situation won't create any complications. My situation. That's what she called my son, the grandson she'd never bothered to meet. 2 days later, Ethan and I loaded our life into my ancient Honda Civic. As Seattle's skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror, he pressed his face against the window, watching the city that had been his whole world fade away. Will they like me? He asked quietly as we merged onto I-5 South. I couldn't lie to him, not about this. I don't know, baby, but we'll have each other no matter what. He nodded and reached for my hand, his fingers still small in mine. We drove toward Napa Valley in silence, both of us knowing we were heading into something that would test us in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The hills of wine country waited ahead, beautiful and terrible, holding all the ghosts I'd tried to leave behind. The Hayes estate looked exactly as I'd left it, immaculate, intimidating, and cold despite the warm California sun. The main house rose from manicured gardens like a monument to everything I'd never been. Ethan pressed closer to my side as we climbed the stone steps, his violin case bumping against his leg with each step. My mother appeared in the doorway before we could knock. Denise Hayes, at 62, was still formidable. Silver hair pulled back severely, wearing cream linen that wouldn't dare wrinkle, her expression carefully neutral as she assessed us like inventory. You're late, she said by way of greeting. We were actually 10 minutes early. Traffic, I lied, knowing she'd tracked our progress the entire drive. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, cataloging him with the same critical eye she'd once used to find flaws in my posture, my grades, my choice of friends. I felt him shrink under her scrutiny and stepped partially in front of him. This is Ethan, I said, keeping my voice level. Ethan, this is your grandmother. Hello? He offered quietly, attempting a smile. You play violin, she observed, nodding at his case. Not a question. Nothing Denise said was ever really a question. The music room is off limits. Wedding preparations. He can practice in our room, I said quickly. Your old room is being used for Isla's wedding dress fittings. You'll be in the guest cottage. She turned without waiting for a response. I suppose you remember where it is. The guest cottage sat at the edge of the property, a calculated distance from the main house. Close enough to summon if needed, far enough to forget we existed. As we dragged our suitcases down the gravel path, I caught Ethan looking back at the big house with something like longing. It's better this way, I told him, unlocking the cottage door. More privacy. The space was pristine but sterile, staged like a vacation rental, with no sign that family had ever lived here. Ethan set his violin case carefully on the coffee table and walked to the window overlooking the vineyard. It's pretty, he said, trying to sound optimistic. All those rows of grapes look like green rivers. My artistic boy, finding beauty even here. I joined him at the window, seeing the view through his eyes instead of through my memories. Want to know a secret? I asked. When I was your age, I used to sneak out at dawn and paint the sunrise over those vines. Your grandmother never knew. Did you keep any of the paintings? No, sweetheart, I left them all behind. That afternoon, while Ethan unpacked, I walked to the main house to discuss logistics. I found my mother in her office, surrounded by wedding planners and fabric swatches. Isla stood at the center of it all, radiant in the kind of effortless beauty that had always come naturally to her. She'd grown more polished in our years apart, honey blonde hair styled to perfection, wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Amelia!" She rushed over with air kisses that didn't quite touch my cheeks. "I can't believe you're here, although the timing is absolutely chaotic with the wedding. You remember what Mother always says about timing. Everything has its season," I recited automatically. "Exactly! And wedding season waits for no one." She laughed, the sound bright and sharp as champagne flutes clinking. "You'll meet Daniel at dinner. He's absolutely perfect. Stanford MBA, family owns half the tech industry. Mother adores him." Of course she did. I smiled and nodded through 20 minutes of wedding details. The imported orchids, the string quartet from San Francisco, the 7-course tasting menu that would showcase the estate's best vintages. Through it all, my mother watched me with an expression I couldn't read. Dinner that night was an orchestrated affair. The dining room table stretched long enough to emphasize the distance between us. Daniel turned out to be handsome in a catalog way. Styled hair, practiced smile. The kind of man who probably had a personal trainer and an investment portfolio he checked religiously. But when Ethan quietly asked about the vineyard's history for a school project, something shifted in Daniel's expression. He leaned forward, genuinely engaged, explaining the soil composition and climate patterns that made Napa Valley special. For 20 minutes, he treated my son's questions with respect and interest until Isla pointedly changed the subject to wedding preparations. "Ethan will need to be fitted for his outfit," my mother announced over dessert. "I assume he knows how to behave at formal events?" "He's 10, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Age is no excuse for poor manners. Isla was attending charity galas at 8. "I'll be good," Ethan promised quietly. And my heart cracked a little at his eagerness to please people who'd already decided he didn't belong. Over the next week, we settled into an uneasy routine. I spent my days job hunting on my laptop and helping with wedding tasks that kept me away from the actual planning. Ethan explored the grounds, practiced violin in whispers, and tried to make himself invisible when my mother was around. But invisibility was a skill I'd never quite mastered, and neither had my son. "He left fingerprints on the silver," my mother informed me one morning, as if reporting a capital crime. "He was trying to help set the table," I explained. "Help?" She looked genuinely puzzled by the concept. "We have staff for that. Perhaps you should explain boundaries to him. Not everything needs to be touched or explored. Some things are simply meant to be admired from a distance." Like family, I thought, but didn't say. The tension grew with each passing day. Ethan began eating less, speaking only when directly addressed. I watched my vibrant, curious boy trying to compress himself into something smaller, more acceptable, and felt fury build in my chest like a storm. Then Isla announced at dinner that her maid of honor had canceled last minute. Food poisoning from a sushi place in Marin. "What a disaster," she sighed dramatically. "The dress is already fitted for her height. Where will I find someone suitable in 3 weeks?" "Amelia is the same height," Daniel observed mildly, cutting his steak. The silence that followed could have frozen wine in its glass. Isla's smile went rigid while my mother's fingers tightened on her fork. "Don't be ridiculous," Isla said finally. "Amelia has responsibilities. Her situation doesn't really allow for that kind of commitment." My situation. There it was again, reducing my entire life to an inconvenience. "What situation?" Daniel asked, and I could have kissed him for the genuine confusion in his voice. "Nothing," Isla said quickly. "Just, you know how it is. Some people are meant to stand in the spotlight, and others, well, they have different roles to play." I looked at my son, saw him absorbing yet another lesson in where we ranked in the Hayes family hierarchy, and made a decision. "You're right," I said, my voice steady as granite. "We all have our roles, and mine is making sure my son knows his worth isn't determined by anyone's spotlight but his own." The next morning, I began planning our exit strategy. We'd stayed under this roof before, lived by these rules, let them diminish us. But that was before I had Ethan to protect. Before I understood that some family legacies were meant to be broken. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks to find a job, save enough for a deposit somewhere else, and get us out. 3 weeks to pretend I didn't see the storm building behind my sister's perfect smile. The past has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, like bodies in a lake when the water level drops. I discovered this truth while searching for my old art supplies in the attic, hoping to find something to keep Ethan occupied during the endless wedding preparations. Instead, I found a box of photos from college, pictures I didn't even know existed. There was Nathan, my first real love, laughing at some party I'd forgotten. His arm was around me in most of them, but in one particular photo, taken at a vineyard picnic our senior year, he was looking at someone just outside the frame. The expression on his face stopped me cold. I'd seen that look before, but never directed at me. I flipped through more photos, and the story assembled itself like a poisonous puzzle. There was Isla, visiting me at college more frequently than I remembered. Always there for the big events, the parties, the moments when Nathan would be present. In photo after photo, she positioned herself strategically, never obviously pursuing, but always somehow ending up next to him, touching his arm, leaning in to whisper something that made him laugh. My hands shook as I found the last photo in the stack. Nathan and Isla at my graduation party, standing too close in the background while I celebrated with friends in the foreground. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Nathan had ended our 2-year relationship with a text message saying he needed space to figure things out. I left for Seattle a week later, too heartbroken to stay and watch whatever came next. Now I understood why Isla had never mentioned Nathan in all our sparse communications over the years. She'd gotten what she wanted and moved on to the next conquest. "Mom?" Ethan's voice drifted up from below. "Grandma wants to see you in the library." I shoved the photos back in the box, my mind reeling. How many other truths had I missed? How many times had Isla taken something simply because it was mine? The library hadn't changed. Dark wood, leather-bound books that no one read, and my mother sitting behind the massive desk like a judge preparing to pass sentence. But what caught my attention was the folder open in front of her. "Sit," she commanded, and I felt 16 again, about to be lectured for some perceived failing. "I've been reviewing the guest list," she began without preamble. "And I'm concerned about your appearance at the wedding. You'll need appropriate attire. I've taken the liberty of scheduling appointments at several boutiques. I can't afford the Hayes family reputation is not negotiable. You'll charge it to the estate account." She slid a credit card across the desk. "Within reason, of course. And Amelia? Do try to present yourself appropriately. Your current style is rather..." She waved her hand vaguely, the gesture encompassing everything she found lacking about me. "Artistic?" I suggested, knowing it would irritate her. "Unsuitable," she corrected. "This wedding will have media coverage. Several lifestyle magazines are interested. I won't have you looking like..." Another pause, another dismissive wave. "Like what, Mother? Like someone who works for a living? Like a single mom doing her best?" Her eyes narrowed. "Like someone who left this family to pursue foolish dreams and returned with nothing to show for it but a child and debt." The words hung between us, poison dressed as truth. Before I could respond, she opened another folder. "Speaking of your child, there have been incidents." "What incidents?" "The staff report that he's been exploring areas of the house that are off limits. Yesterday, he was found in the wine cellar. Unsupervised children and valuable vintages are a dangerous combination. He's curious. He's never seen anything like this place. Curiosity and misbehavior are often confused by permissive parents." She closed the folder with finality. "I've arranged for him to spend the wedding day with the childcare service we've hired for guests' children. They'll keep him appropriately occupied and away from the main event. He's not going to some kid's corner like an afterthought. He's family." "Is he?" The question sliced through my defenses. "Family understands expectations. Family contributes. Family doesn't disappear for over a decade and return only when desperate." I stood, taking the credit card because I needed clothes for Ethan more than I needed my pride. "You're right about one thing. Family does understand expectations. I expect better." That evening, I found Ethan in the cottage, practicing violin so quietly I could barely hear it through his bedroom door. When I knocked, he quickly put the instrument away. "You don't have to stop," I said, sitting on his bed. "You play beautifully." "Grandma says it's too loud. It disturbs the wedding planning." Another piece of my heart chipped away. What else does Grandma say? He shrugged, but I waited. I'd learned patience from being his mother. She asked why I don't have a dad. He finally admitted. I didn't know what to say. What did you tell her? That we don't need one. That you're enough. He looked up at me with those earnest eyes. Was that okay? I pulled him close, this boy who defended me even to dragons. That was perfect. Later that night, unable to sleep, I walked through the vineyard. The moon turned the grape leaves silver, and memories flooded back. Painting here at dawn, dreaming of art school, believing the world held space for people like me. Then I saw movement near the old garden shed, heard voices carried on the wind. Can't believe she actually came back. Isla's voice, slightly slurred from wine. You should have told me about the history. Daniel's response, sober and oddly tense. Nathan, really? Ancient history. Besides, she left. She always leaves when things get complicated. Is that what happened? She just left? A pause. Then Isla's laugh, bright and bitter. What does it matter? I got Nathan, she got her artistic freedom or whatever she was chasing. Everyone got what they wanted. Did they? Nathan isn't here, Isla. Hasn't been for years from what you've told me. Because he was weak, just like her. Always talking about feelings and meaning and purpose. God, it was exhausting. You're nothing like that, thank goodness. You understand that success matters more than whatever they thought they had. I pressed back against the vines, processing this revelation. She'd pursued Nathan not because she wanted him, but because I had him. And once she'd won, once she'd proven she could take him, she'd discarded him like last season's shoes. We should go in, Daniel said, but something in his voice had changed. Big day tomorrow with the cake tasting. I waited until their footsteps faded before making my way back to the cottage. In the morning, I'd smile through the boutique appointments, let them dress me up like a doll if it meant protecting Ethan from their worst impulses. But I was done pretending not to see the rot beneath the surface. 3 more weeks. I just had to survive 3 more weeks. But as I climbed into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Isla wasn't done taking things from me. The wedding loomed ahead like a beautiful trap, and I was walking straight into it with my eyes wide open this time. The pre-wedding party was everything a Hayes event should be. Excessive, elegant, and engineered to impress. The vineyard's main pavilion had been transformed into something from a magazine spread, all twinkling lights and white roses, with enough champagne to fill a swimming pool. I stood at the edge in my carefully selected dress, watching Ethan nervously adjust his tie. You look handsome, I told him, smoothing his collar. Do I look like I belong? He asked quietly, and the question broke my heart all over again. You belong wherever you are, baby. Don't let anyone tell you different. But even as I said it, I could feel the eyes on us. The other guests, venture capitalists, wine moguls, people whose names appeared in society pages, regarded us with polite curiosity, as if trying to place us in their mental hierarchy. I saw them lean into each other, whisper, glance our way. The black sheep and her lamb returned to the fold. Amelia! Isla glided over, resplendent in silver that caught the light like scales. Don't you look nice? Very appropriate. The backhanded compliment rolled off me, but I noticed Daniel beside her, his expression oddly strained. He'd been different since that overheard conversation in the vineyard, watching more, speaking less, especially around Isla. Ethan, Isla continued, her smile sharp as glass. Why don't you go help yourself to some juice? The children's refreshment table is over there. He's fine here, I said, but Ethan was already walking away, shoulders hunched. I started to follow, but Isla caught my arm. Let him go. He needs to learn independence, although... She paused dramatically, a skill she'd perfected over years of commanding attention. You might want to keep a closer eye on him. Things have been going missing. What things? Oh, nothing serious. Just some small items from the gift table. I'm sure it's just childish curiosity. Her tone suggested anything but innocence. We've all been young and tempted by pretty things we can't have. Before I could respond, she was swept away by another group of guests, leaving me with the distinct feeling of a trap being set. The party flowed around me in waves of conversation and laughter. I nursed a single glass of wine, staying sharp, watching Ethan make painful attempts to interact with the few other children present. all of whom seemed to have been coached by their parents to maintain distance from the outsider. Then Denise's voice cut through the celebration like a knife through cake. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I might have your attention." She stood at the microphone, every inch the matriarch. "We have a small situation. My grandmother's antique watch, a family heirloom worth considerable sentimental and monetary value, appears to have gone missing from the display." A ripple of concern passed through the crowd. The watch had been part of the pre-wedding display, showcasing family treasures that would be passed to the new couple. I'd seen it earlier, Art Deco, diamond-encrusted, the kind of piece that belonged in a museum. "I'm certain it's simply been misplaced," Denise continued, her tone suggesting the opposite. "But perhaps everyone could check to ensure it hasn't been accidentally, relocated." That's when I noticed Isla near the gift table. Her movements too casual, too practiced. She was standing near Ethan's jacket, which he'd left draped over a chair when the evening grew warm. "Perhaps," Isla said, loud enough to carry, "we should start by checking the most likely places. After all, children can be so curious about shiny things." "What are you suggesting?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Nothing at all," she replied sweetly. "I just think we should be thorough, check everywhere, even the most unexpected places." Daniel moved then, subtle but deliberate, positioning himself between Isla and Ethan's jacket. "Maybe we should call security," he suggested. "Let professionals handle this." "No need for such drama," Denise intervened. "This is a family matter. Isla, dear, why don't you help look? You have such sharp eyes." What happened next unfolded like a choreographed dance. Isla moved toward the jacket, her hand reaching out as if to help. I lunged forward, but I was too far away. Then Ethan appeared from nowhere, returning from the bathroom just as Isla lifted his jacket. "Oh," she gasped, perfectly timed. "What's this?" The watch tumbled from the jacket pocket, landing on the pavilion floor with a damning clatter. The silence that followed was absolute, every eye turning to my 10-year-old son, who stood frozen in confusion and growing horror. "I didn't," he started, his voice small and breaking. "I've never seen that before." "Of course," Denise said, each word dripping with false sympathy. "These things happen. Children from certain circumstances sometimes struggle with boundaries." "My son is not a thief," I said, moving to stand beside Ethan, pulling him against me. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Isla said, bending to retrieve the watch with theatrical care. "Though I'm sure he didn't mean any harm. Some children just need more guidance." I looked around the pavilion, at the faces ranging from scandalized to sympathetic, and realized this had been planned. Every moment, every word, designed to humiliate us in the most public way possible. "This is a setup," I said clearly, addressing the crowd. "My son has been framed." "Amelia," my mother's voice was ice, "don't make this worse with wild accusations. We'll handle this privately, though I think it's best if you and the boy retire for the evening." "Mom," Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't take it. I promise I didn't take it." "I know, baby, I know." Daniel stepped forward then, his face troubled. "Perhaps we should review the security footage. The pavilion has cameras, doesn't it? That would clear everything up." Isla's hand tightened on his arm. "Darling, there's no need. It's been found, no harm done. Let's not turn this into more of a scene." "But if the boy says he didn't take it..." "Daniel," Denise's voice cut through his protest. "My daughter is right. The matter is resolved. Though perhaps, Amelia, you should consider whether this environment is appropriate for a child who's clearly struggling." We left the pavilion in a walk of shame, guests parting before us like we were contagious. Ethan sobbed against my side, his small body shaking with injustice and humiliation. Behind us, I heard the party resuming, Isla's laugh rising above the rest, victorious. In the cottage, I held my son while he cried himself to sleep, whispering promises that I knew the truth, that he was good and honest and brave. But as I tucked him into bed, I made myself a different promise. They'd drawn first blood, but they'd also made a mistake. They'd shown their hand too early, gotten too confident. And Daniel had doubts. I'd seen it in his eyes, the way he'd tried to intervene. Tomorrow would bring the wedding and whatever fresh hell Isla had planned. But tonight, in the darkness of the cottage, I began to plan my own moves. They wanted to play games with my child. They had no idea what a mother was capable of when her baby was threatened. The watch incident was just the beginning. I could feel it in my bones, the way I used to sense storms rolling in over the vineyard. But this time, I wouldn't run from the storm. This time, I'd become it. The morning of Isla's wedding dawned perfect. Because of course it did. The universe seemed to conspire in her favor. Golden sunlight streaming through the vines, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of roses, and not a cloud in the California sky. I stood at the cottage window watching the army of workers transform the estate into a fairy tale, while my son refused to leave his bed. "They all think I'm a thief," Ethan said, his voice muffled by pillows. "We know the truth. That's what matters." "Is it, though, when everyone believes a lie?" I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I helped him into his suit. We would attend this wedding with our heads high, no matter what they'd tried to do to us. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock, but the festivities began early. By noon, guests were arriving in expensive cars, their laughter floating across the grounds like champagne bubbles. Denise had arranged our seating personally. We were placed at the back corner table near the catering station and portable restrooms. Not quite servants, but certainly not family. "At least we can escape easily," I told Ethan, trying to make light of it. He managed a small smile. "And we're close to the cake," my brave boy, finding silver linings even now. As the afternoon wore on, I noticed Daniel repeatedly checking his phone, his jaw tight. He'd barely spoken to Isla during the pre-ceremony photos, and when he did, their smiles looked painted on. Something had shifted since last night. The doubt I'd seen in his eyes had grown into something else. Suspicion, maybe, or recognition. Then, an hour before the ceremony, Isla struck again. "Amelia!" Her voice carried across the lawn, high and distressed. "Amelia, I need you!" I found her in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids, her face a mask of practiced anguish. At her feet lay the shattered remains of a crystal sculpture, a pair of swans that had been the centerpiece of the gift table. "It's ruined!" she wailed. "My something borrowed. Great-grandmother's crystal swans. They've been in the family for generations." "What happened?" I asked, though I could already sense the trap closing. "That's what I want to know." Her tears stopped as quickly as they'd started, her voice hardening. "They were fine an hour ago. The only person who's been in here since then is—" She paused, letting the bridesmaids fill in the blank with their stares. "Ethan was with me," I said firmly. "Was he? The whole time?" "Because someone saw him near the bridal suite earlier. Looking for the bathroom, apparently." She stood, her wedding dress rustling like snake scales. "First the watch, now this. Amelia, I've tried to be understanding about your situation, but this pattern of behavior is disturbing." "The only pattern here is what?" Denise appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with one sweeping glance. "What's happened now?" Isla gestured to the broken crystal. "Great-grandmother's swans, destroyed, and Ethan was seen—" "I did go to the bathroom," Ethan's small voice interrupted from behind me. I hadn't heard him approach. "But I didn't go in any rooms. I got lost, and a man helped me find the bathroom. The man in the suit with the camera." "The photographer?" Denise's voice dripped skepticism. "How convenient. I suppose he can verify this story? Why don't we ask him?" Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "In fact, why don't we check all the security footage? That would clear up last night's incident, too." "There's no time," Isla snapped. "The ceremony starts in 45 minutes. "Then we'd better hurry," Daniel said mildly. "Unless you have some reason not to want the footage reviewed." The room went silent. Isla's face cycled through emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on wounded innocence. "I can't believe you're taking their side," she whispered. "Today of all days." "I'm not taking sides. I'm seeking truth." He looked at her steadily. "That shouldn't be a problem, should it?" The tension crackled between them until Denise intervened. "The footage can be reviewed after the ceremony. Right now we have a wedding to conduct. Amelia, perhaps it would be best if you and the boy—" "No." The word came out stronger than I'd intended. "We're done being sent away. We're done being scapegoated. You want us gone? Fine. But first, we're watching that footage." "How dare you make demands in my house, and—" "Your house?" I laughed, the sound bitter as old wine. This was my home too, once. Before you made it clear that only perfect daughters were welcome. Before you let Isla take everything that mattered to me. What are you talking about? Daniel asked quietly. Ask her about Nathan, I said, looking directly at Isla. Ask her why she really visited me so often in college. Isla's composure finally cracked. You left. You always leave when things get difficult. I left because you took him, just like you're trying to take my son's reputation now. Ladies, a new voice cut through our argument. The photographer stood in the doorway, his camera in hand. I couldn't help but overhear. The young man is right. I did help him find the bathroom about 30 minutes ago. He never entered this room. He paused, looking directly at Denise. I have the timestamp on my camera if you'd like to verify. The silence that followed was deafening. Isla's face had gone pale beneath her makeup, while Denise's expression could have curdled milk. A misunderstanding, Denise said finally. No harm done. Now, if everyone could return to their preparations, Sig. No. We all turned to look at Daniel. He stood straighter, his decision made. I want to see the security footage, he said. All of it, from last night and today. Daniel, darling. Isla reached for him, but he stepped back. Don't. The single word carried years of small doubts suddenly crystallizing. I've watched you manipulate situations before, explained it away as family dynamics I didn't understand. But this, using a child as a pawn, this is too far. How can you say that? Tears flowed down Isla's cheeks, real this time. Today is our wedding day. Yes, he agreed quietly, which is why I need to know who I'm really marrying. The wedding music started in the distance, a cruel irony as the fairy tale crumbled in the bridal suite. Guests were taking their seats, expecting a show. They were about to get one, just not the one they'd anticipated. Security footage, Daniel repeated. Now, or I walk out there and tell 300 guests that the wedding is postponed pending investigation of fraud and defamation of a minor. Denise's face went white. The media was here. The society photographers, the lifestyle magazines she'd courted so carefully. This is ridiculous, she hissed. Isla, tell him. But Isla was looking at Daniel with something like panic. You wouldn't dare. The embarrassment would be yours, he finished. I've been embarrassed before, survived it. But I won't marry someone who would destroy a child to score points against her sister. I pulled Ethan closer, feeling the ground shift beneath us. This wasn't how I'd expected things to go. The dragon was turning on the princess, and the kingdom was about to burn. The footage, Daniel said one more time. Or I leave. Choose. In the distance, the wedding march began to play, and 300 guests turned to watch a bride who wasn't coming. The perfect Hayes wedding was about to become the perfect Hayes disaster. The security office was a small room off the main house, cramped with monitors and recording equipment. The wedding march continued to play in the distance, a surreal soundtrack to the unfolding disaster. Daniel had insisted we all crowd in. Isla in her wedding dress, Denise rigid with fury, the photographer who'd become an unexpected witness, Ethan pressed against my side, and the bewildered security guard who'd been pulled from his post. Pull up yesterday evening around 8:30, Daniel instructed, his voice calm but firm. Start with the pavilion cameras. This is unnecessary, Denise said coldly. The guests are waiting. Let them wait, Daniel replied without looking at her. I've waited long enough for the truth. The footage loaded, grainy but clear enough. We watched the pre-wedding party unfold in fast forward until Daniel told the guard to stop. There on the screen, Isla stood near the gift table, her back to the camera, but her actions unmistakable. She glanced around, then reached into her purse, pulling out something that caught the light. The watch. Zoom in, Daniel said quietly. The image enlarged, pixelated but damning. Isla moved toward where Ethan's jacket hung on a chair. Another furtive glance, then she slipped the watch into the pocket with practiced ease. I was protecting the watch, Isla said quickly. I saw it sitting there unattended and… Stop! Daniel's voice cut through her excuse. Just stop. Now show this morning, around 11. The guard switched feeds. This time, the camera showed the hallway outside the bridal suite. We watched Ethan approach, clearly lost, looking at door numbers. The photographer appeared, pointed him toward the bathroom. Ethan went in the indicated direction, never once approaching the bridal suite. Now the suite interior, Daniel said. We don't have cameras in, the guard began. The hallway camera catches part of the doorway, Daniel interrupted. Show 15 minutes before Ethan was in the hall. More clicking, more footage, and there it was. Isla entering the bridal suite alone, carrying something wrapped in tissue. Through the partially visible doorway, we watched her unwrap the crystal swans, hold them up to the light, then deliberately drop them. The sound wasn't captured, but we could see her mouth form an O of false surprise. My God, the photographer breathed. She broke her own family heirloom. They're not family heirlooms, I said, the pieces finally clicking. I remember those swans. Isla bought them at an estate sale 3 years ago, posted about it on Instagram, said they were inspiration for her someday wedding. Daniel turned to look at his bride-to-be, and I saw in his face the death of every feeling he'd had for her. Why? He asked simply. Isla's careful composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand. She comes back here, acting like she's better than us because she struggled, because she raised her kid alone. Mom actually felt sorry for her. Started saying maybe she'd been too hard on Amelia. Maybe she should help with Ethan's education. That money was supposed to be for our children, Daniel. Our future. So you decided to frame a 10-year-old boy? Daniel's voice was so quiet it was terrifying. I was proving a point. That she's the same irresponsible person who ran away, who can't even control her own child. I was protecting our family. Our family? Daniel laughed, the sound hollow. We don't have a family, Isla. We have a lie built on manipulation and cruelty. And you... He looked at Denise then. You knew, didn't you? Maybe not the specifics, but you knew what she was doing. Denise lifted her chin, every inch the imperious matriarch even as her world crumbled. I knew my daughter was protecting what's hers. Amelia has always been weak, emotional, unsuitable for... For what? Being your daughter? I found my voice finally. Tell me, Mother, what exactly made me so unsuitable? That I felt things? That I cared about art more than status? That I refused to turn into you? You refused to be anything of value, Denise snapped. You could have had everything. The education, the connections, the life we built for you. Instead, you threw it all away for what? To paint pictures no one buys? To work in a library? To raise a child alone? That child, Daniel said, showed more integrity in 5 minutes than either of you have displayed in years. He looked down at Ethan. I'm sorry, young man. You deserved better from all of us. Then he turned to the security guard. Please save all of this footage, multiple copies. To the photographer, I'll need your time-stamped images as well. Daniel, what are you doing? Isla grabbed his arm. The guests, the wedding. There isn't going to be a wedding. He removed her hand from his arm, gently but firmly. I'll go make the announcement. You can decide how much you want me to share with them. You can't. Denise's control finally broke. The embarrassment, the scandal, everything I've built. Everything you built was on the backs of the people you stepped on, I said, including your own daughter. I'll ruin you, she hissed at me. I'll make sure you never... What? Never work in a library again? Never have a place in society I didn't want? You have no power over me anymore, Mother. You gave that up the day you chose your reputation over your child. Daniel was already at the door. Isla, you have 5 minutes to decide. Either you come with me and we tell them together that we've mutually decided to postpone, or I go alone and tell them why. Your choice. I'll sue you, Isla said desperately. Breach of promise, emotional distress. Phew. With this footage as evidence? He gestured to the monitors. Good luck with that. By the way, I already texted my lawyer. He's sending a team to collect all the contracts, receipts, and documentation. Turns out, recorded evidence of fraud and conspiracy to defame a minor might interest the district attorney. The word hung in the air like a sword. Criminal charges, jail time. The ultimate fall from grace for the Hayes family. You wouldn't, Denise breathed. Try me, Daniel said. I've spent 2 years watching you both manipulate everyone around you. I convinced myself it was just family politics, harmless games. But targeting a child? That's where you crossed the line into criminal territory. In the distance, the wedding march had stopped. Murmurs of confusion drifted across the grounds. 300 guests wondering where their show had gone. Mom, Ethan tugged on my hand. Can we go now? Yes, baby, I said, scooping him into my arms even though he was getting too big for it. We can go. As we left the security office, I heard Isla sobbing. Real tears this time. The kind that come when you realize you've destroyed your own life. Denise was shouting something about lawyers, about damage control, about how this was all my fault. But I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years looking back, letting them pull me into their poisonous games. Now I had a son to protect and a life to rebuild. Far from the shadow of the Hayes name, Daniel caught up with us at the cottage. I'm sorry, he said simply. For all of it. For not seeing it sooner. You saw it when it mattered, I replied. He handed me a business card. My attorney. He'll help with whatever comes next. Restraining orders, defamation suits, whatever you need. Pro bono. Why? He looked at Ethan, then back at me. Because someone needs to stand up for the people they stepped on. Might as well be me. As he walked back to face the crowd, to dismantle the fairy tale in front of society's watching eyes, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Justice. It tasted sweeter than any wine the Hayes vineyard had ever produced. The courthouse in Napa County was smaller than I'd expected, but it didn't make the moment any less momentous. 3 months had passed since the wedding disaster, and in that time the Hayes empire had crumbled like old parchment exposed to flame. I sat in the plaintiff's section with Ethan beside me, his hand in mine. Both of us dressed in our best clothes, not to impress, but to show respect for the justice we'd come to witness. Daniel's legal team had been thorough. What started as an investigation into fraud had uncovered years of financial manipulation, tax evasion, and a pattern of harassment against former employees who'd dared to cross Denise Hayes. The security footage from the wedding had been just the beginning, a thread that, when pulled, unraveled everything. All rise, the bailiff announced, and we stood as Judge Morrison entered. Across the aisle, Denise and Isla looked diminished. Designer clothes couldn't hide the weight of consequence settling on their shoulders. Their attorney, the third one after the first two had withdrawn, whispered frantically to them as the judge took her seat. In the matter of Hayes versus Hayes, with additional criminal charges pending, Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying the weight of authority. I've reviewed all evidence presented, including video footage, financial records, and witness testimonies. I glanced sideways and saw someone unexpected in the gallery. Aunt Clara, my mother's sister who'd been sent away years ago. She caught my eye and nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. She'd flown in from Vermont to testify about the pattern of abuse in the Hayes family, bringing with her medical records and diary entries that painted a damning picture of Denise's systematic cruelty. The evidence clearly shows a deliberate pattern of harassment, fraud, and conspiracy to commit defamation against a minor, the judge continued. The defendants used their wealth and position to attempt to destroy the reputation of a 10-year-old child out of pure malice. Ethan straightened beside me. He'd been so brave through all of this, testifying in depositions, facing down the people who'd tried to break him. The court-appointed child advocate had been amazed by his composure and clarity. Furthermore, Judge Morrison said, the financial investigation revealed extensive embezzlement from the Hayes Family Trust, funds that should have been equally distributed among beneficiaries but were instead diverted for personal use. That had been another shocking revelation. The trust my grandparents had established was meant for all their grandchildren, including any I might have. Denise and Isla had hidden its existence, convincing me I'd been disinherited when in reality they'd been stealing my portion for years. Before I render my verdict, does anyone wish to make a statement? Daniel stood. He'd been incredible throughout this process, using his resources not for revenge, but for justice. Your Honor, I'd like to submit a victim impact statement, if I may. The judge nodded, and Daniel moved to the podium. I was complicit in the Hayes family's culture of cruelty through my silence, he began. I saw the warning signs and explained them away. It took witnessing them target a child to finally open my eyes. Ethan Hayes is one of the bravest people I've ever met. He stood up to adults who tried to destroy him, maintained his integrity when they tried to break it, and showed more grace than they deserved. He and his mother deserve not just justice, but a future free from the shadow of this toxic legacy. He returned to his seat as Ethan wiped away tears. Even the court reporter looked moved. "Ms. Amelia Hayes," the judge said, "would you like to speak?" I stood on shaky legs. I'd prepared a statement, practiced it a dozen times, but now the words felt inadequate. "Your Honor," I began, finding strength in Ethan's encouraging squeeze of my hand. I spent years believing I was the problem, that I was too emotional, too artistic, too different to deserve my family's love. They convinced me that leaving was my failure, not their cruelty. But watching them target my son, an innocent child, finally showed me the truth. They are predators who feed on others' vulnerability. I don't want revenge. I want protection. I want my son to grow up knowing that truth matters, that justice exists, and that no amount of money or status gives anyone the right to destroy others for sport. I sat down, my heart pounding. Across the aisle, Isla was crying. Whether from remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. Denise stared straight ahead, her face a mask of cold fury. "The defendants may make a statement," Judge Morrison said. Their lawyer whispered urgently, but Denise stood anyway. "I did what any mother would do to protect her family's interests," she said, her voice still carrying that imperious tone. "If that's a crime, then that's enough," her lawyer interrupted, practically pulling her back to her seat. Judge Morrison's expression was stern. "Mrs. Hayes, protecting family interests doesn't include framing children for theft or embezzling from trusts. The court finds the defendants guilty on all counts." The gavel came down like thunder. Sentencing is as follows. Denise Hayes, 18 months in state prison for embezzlement and conspiracy, followed by 5 years probation. Isla Hayes, 1 year in county jail for fraud and conspiracy to commit defamation of a minor, followed by 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service, specifically working with at-risk youth. Both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution to the trust, plus damages for emotional distress and legal fees. I felt Ethan exhale beside me, the tension leaving his small body. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "a permanent restraining order is granted. The defendants are forbidden from coming within 500 feet of Amelia or Ethan Hayes, from contacting them directly or indirectly, or from making any public statements about them. Violation will result in immediate imprisonment." "Your Honor," Denise's lawyer stood, "my clients intend to appeal." "That's their right," Judge Morrison said calmly. "But given the overwhelming evidence and their lack of remorse, I doubt they'll find a sympathetic appellate court. This case is concluded." The gavel fell one final time, and it was over. As the bailiffs moved to take Denise and Isla into custody, my mother looked at me one last time. I expected hate, but what I saw was worse. Complete incomprehension. She truly didn't understand how it had come to this, how her carefully constructed world had collapsed. In her mind, she would always be the victim of an ungrateful daughter's vindictiveness. Outside the courthouse, the California sun felt warmer, brighter. Daniel waited by his car, having driven up from San Francisco, where he'd relocated after the canceled wedding. "Thank you," I said simply. "Don't thank me, I should have seen it sooner." He ruffled Ethan's hair gently. "Take care of your mom, okay? She's pretty special." "I know," Ethan said with a grin, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. As Daniel drove away, Aunt Clara approached. "I'm proud of you," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and freedom. "You broke the cycle. Your grandparents would be proud." That night, back in our apartment in Seattle, secured with the settlement from the trust, Ethan and I ordered pizza and watched movies. Simple, normal, perfect. The Hayes name no longer hung over us like a curse. We were just ourselves, finally and completely. "Mom," Ethan said as he headed to bed, "I'm glad we went back. Not because of what happened, but because now we know for sure where we belong." "Where's that, baby?" "Wherever we are together, that's home." He was right. The vineyard, the wealth, the family name, none of it mattered. We'd found something more valuable than any inheritance: the truth, justice, and the freedom to build our own legacy. One based on love, not fear. On honesty, not manipulation. On us. 2 years later, the bell above my bookshop door chimed on a crisp October morning. Storybook Vines had become a fixture in downtown Napa, a cozy haven where literature and local wine culture intertwined. I looked up from arranging a display of children's books to see a familiar face. Daniel, carrying a box of fresh pastries from the bakery next door. "Thought you might need fuel for story time," he said, setting the box on the counter. "Heard you were expecting a full house today." 23 kids signed up, I confirmed, unable to hide my smile. Ethan's been practicing his character voices all week. Through the shop window, I could see my son in the children's reading nook, adjusting tiny chairs and testing the microphone we'd installed for our weekend story sessions. At 12, he'd grown tall and confident, his gentle nature intact but reinforced with steel. He'd become something of a local hero, the kid who'd stood up to bullies and won, who now spent his Saturdays reading to younger children and his afternoons tutoring kids who struggled with English. "Is he still planning to perform at the Harvest Festival?" Daniel asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot I kept for customers. "With his quartet. They're doing a piece he composed himself." Pride swelled in my chest. "The music teacher says he has real talent." Daniel smiled, that easy, genuine expression I'd grown accustomed to over the past 2 years. After the trial, he'd stayed in touch, first through legal updates, then friendly check-ins, and eventually, this. Whatever this was, we hadn't put a label on it, hadn't rushed anything. We were building something slow and solid, the way trust should be built. "I have news," he said, his tone shifting. "Isla was released last week." My hand stilled on the book I was shelving. "I know, the victim notification system sent an alert. Has she tried to contact you?" "She can't. Restraining order, remember?" I resumed my task, keeping my voice steady. "Besides, I heard she moved to Los Angeles. Something about starting over in a place where the Hayes name doesn't mean anything. And your mother? Still has 6 months left. Apparently, she's been teaching etiquette classes to other inmates." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. At least she found a captive audience for her lectures on proper behavior. The bell chimed again, and Aunt Clara entered, her arms full of autumn flowers from her garden. She'd moved to Napa permanently after the trial, buying a small cottage just outside town where she grew lavender and wrote the memoir she'd always dreamed of penning. "These are for the reading nook," she announced, then paused, noticing Daniel. "Oh, good, you're here. Saves me a phone call. Sunday dinner at my place? I'm making that butternut squash soup you liked." "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel replied. And I marveled at how natural this felt, building a chosen family from the ashes of the one that had burned. As Clara arranged flowers and Daniel helped unpack a shipment of new books, I watched Ethan through the window. He was greeting the arriving children with high fives and warm smiles, helping the shy ones find good seats, making everyone feel welcome. He'd learned early what exclusion felt like, and had decided to be the person who made sure no one else felt that way. "5 minutes to story time," Ethan called out, and I headed to the reading nook. The tradition had started small, just Ethan reading to a few neighborhood kids while I worked, but word spread, and now Saturday Stories with Ethan was booked solid through Christmas. Parents drove from 3 towns over to bring their children, drawn by my son's gift for bringing stories to life and the safe, inclusive space we'd created. "Today's story is about a brave knight," Ethan announced once everyone was settled. But this knight's greatest weapon wasn't a sword or shield, it was the truth. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him captivate his audience. Daniel appeared beside me, Clara on my other side. In that moment, I felt the full weight of how far we'd come. The Hayes Vineyard still operated, now under new management after being seized for tax violations. I'd been offered the chance to claim my portion, to return to the estate that should have been partly mine. I'd declined. That soil was poisoned with too many bitter harvests. Instead, I'd used my settlement to build something new. This bookshop, this life, this future that smelled like coffee and old paper and possibilities. "Aunt Amelia?" A small voice tugged me from my reverie. One of the regular kids stood before me, holding a painted rock. "I made this for you. It's for your gratitude garden." I accepted the rainbow-painted stone, adding it to the collection on the windowsill. Gifts from children who felt safe here, who knew they mattered. "It's perfect, sweetie. Thank you." After story time, as parents collected their children and the shop filled with chatter and laughter, I found a quiet moment to step outside. The town was preparing for the harvest festival, stringing lights between lamp posts and setting up vendor stalls. The local newspaper had run a feature about our bookshop last week, calling it the heart of New Napa's cultural renaissance. They'd wanted to mention my family history, the trial, the dramatic fall of the Hayes dynasty. I'd declined. That wasn't my story anymore. "Ms. Hayes?" A tentative voice made me turn. A young woman stood nearby, nervously clutching an envelope. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Emma Chen from the Napa Valley Foster Family Association. We heard about your youth literacy program and were wondering, would you consider expanding it? We have so many kids who could benefit from a place like this." I took the envelope, feeling the weight of possibility inside. "Let me discuss it with my team," I said, glancing back at Daniel and Clara, who were helping Ethan reset the reading nook. "But I think we can work something out." As Emma walked away, hopeful, I opened the envelope. Inside was a grant proposal, already partially filled out, offering funding to expand our programs. At the bottom, a handwritten note. "Every child deserves someone who believes their voice matters. Thank you for being that person." The afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny celebrations. A text buzzed on my phone. A photo from one of the morning's parents, showing their daughter recreating Ethan's story with her toys at home, completely absorbed in the world he'd helped her imagine. "Good day?" Daniel asked, joining me on the sidewalk. "The best," I replied, meaning it. That evening, as we closed up shop, Ethan helped me count the day's receipts while Daniel prepared dinner upstairs in our apartment. Clara had left a pot of soup on our doorstep with a note. "For the family that feeds souls." "Mom," Ethan said suddenly, looking up from the register. "Do you ever think about them? Grandma and Aunt Isla?" I considered lying, but we'd built our new life on truth. "Sometimes, not with anger anymore, just sadness. For what could have been if they'd chosen differently." "I'm glad they didn't," he said firmly, "because then we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have found our real family." He was right. The family we'd built, Daniel with his quiet support, Clara with her fierce love, the community that had embraced us, was worth more than any inheritance. We'd planted new vines in better soil, and the harvest was sweet. That night, I found an envelope slipped under the shop door. No return address, but I recognized Isla's handwriting. Inside a single sheet of paper. "I'm sorry for all of it. Be happy." I held the letter for a long moment, then fed it to the fireplace. Some chapters were meant to end. Their pages turned to ash so new stories could grow from the fertile ground they left behind. Outside, the Napa Valley stretched beneath the stars, its vineyards preparing for winter's rest. But in our bookshop, in our home, in our hearts, everything was still growing. The stories we told, the connections we nurtured, the love we cultivated, these were our vines now, and they would bear fruit for generations to come. Ethan appeared in the doorway, violin in hand. "Want to hear my new composition? I'm calling it New Harvest." As his music filled the room, hopeful, complex, beautiful, I closed my eyes and let gratitude wash over me. We'd been planted in rocky soil, battered by storms, nearly broken by those who should have sheltered us. But we'd grown anyway, reaching for light, setting down deeper roots, becoming exactly who we were meant to be. The Hayes legacy of manipulation and cruelty ended with Denise and Isla. But the Hayes legacy of resilience, truth, and love? That started with Ethan and me, and it would flourish for generations to come. In the distance, church bells rang the hour and Daniel called us to dinner. Clara would be arriving soon with dessert, and tomorrow would bring new stories, new challenges, new chances to choose love over fear. I gathered my family, chosen and cherished, around our table, in our home above the bookshop, in the town that had become our true vineyard. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty I was exactly where I belonged. The ending wasn't just happy, it was earned, honest, and entirely ours, and that made it perfect.